Welcome to American Issues Take One. I'm Tim Apicella, your host, and today's title is Trump's Historic 37-Count Federal Indictment. Yesterday was a sad, historic day, and depending where you sat on the political spectrum, you either felt, if you were a MAGA GOP individual, felt that you were on board with whatever Donald Trump told you to be on board with. And so you were on board with the fact that these indictments represented nothing more than a political witch hunt. If you were a normal GOP individual, you are now a contortionist. On one hand, you're trying to support the GOP party. And at the other hand, you can't defend what Donald Trump has been gone through with these indictments. And if you're everyone else, you're experiencing the rule of law in progress. You're experiencing what we all know, but we weren't sure of, that no one is above the law. And to discuss this, the indictment of Donald Trump, I have with me my co-host, Jay Fidell, and his brother, Gene Fidell, who is a legal educator. Good morning, gentlemen.
Hello.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Say, William Barr said that if half the evidence is true, Donald Trump's toast. So, Gene, to you first. What's your impression of the indictment, the 37 counts? What strikes you as the most serious of those items listed in the indictment?
It's hard to say which is the most serious. They fall into two categories. One is the obstruction of justice set of charges, and the other is the mishandling of highly classified information. Both of those are important. You could argue that it's the obstruction of justice that is the most disturbing, because the due course of the administration of justice is one of those bedrocks around which everything else revolves in our democratic system. Without that, all the rest of it goes away. So I would have to say the obstruction of justice is the graver of the two. That said, and here I'll speak, I'm not going to name any names or talk specifics, but I've represented people who have been in trouble for mishandling classified information, people who were inadvertent and negligent, people who were pack rats. I'm talking about people in the military, and the United States government takes this kind of thing extremely seriously. It wasn't invented for former President Trump.
Yeah, we have past cases. I think Harold Martin is one of them who has been sentenced 9 years. We had an NSA employee who had couldn't get his work done in time during the normal course of the workday, so he took him home, but he still was handed down a 5.5-year sentence. And then we have recently an Air Force officer who I believe has received 3 years. So these are serious charges. I guess we go to the one about obstruction, Gene, and to what degree is Trump's own attorneys the most damaging as far as their statements and their notes as it pertains to obstruction?
The attorney's role in this, and that's attorneys plural, is part and parcel of the larger scheme. They were active. That he, they, she were active participants. Seemingly, I'm relying on the indictment. I have no independent knowledge of this, but I'm just relying on the allegations in the indictment. Seemingly an effort orchestrated, does this sound familiar, orchestrated by former President Trump. And they were treated as instrumentalities for the purpose of evading the grand jury subpoena and the efforts of the Justice Department and the National Archives and Records Administration to repo the classified documents. So the lawyers played a role, and there is going to be an issue as to whether that role was such that the normal attorney-client privilege, the normal privilege that attaches to attorney-client communications, can be set aside. A federal district judge, the former chief judge of the U.S. District Court in Washington, held that the grand jury subpoena in Washington, directed towards one of Mr. Trump's many lawyers, had to be honored. And there's a crime fraud exception to the attorney-client privilege, and that former chief judge in Washington, Judge Howell, broke the attorney-client privilege.
In your opinion, how important is it for Trump's defense team to try to have that testimony thrown out? And will they be successful?
Well, it's very hard to give odds, but I think given the fact that a dispassionate district judge, in other words, a judge that didn't have any horse in the race, has already ruled against Mr. Trump, effectively against Mr. Trump, on the crime fraud exception to the attorney-client privilege, I would have to assume that the judge in West Palm Beach would do the same thing, either arriving at the same conclusion independently or in deference to Chief Judge Howell's ruling.
Okay, thank you. Hey, Jay, what's your take on the indictment, and what leapt off the pages that caught your attention and you thought was the most serious?
We're talking about the law, the rule of law, the American justice system, as if it were still in place. And but question, is it still in place? Trump has said that he's going to fight like hell. Trump has said, as he has done in so many cases in the past, that he's going to do whatever it takes. Judge Goodman, I think, the magistrate who accepted his plea, warned him not to talk to witnesses. I don't believe that he's not going to talk to witnesses. I believe that he'll have his cronies talk to witnesses. That's what he's done in the past. I don't know if Goodman's order was as nuanced as it needed to be. Trump is going to try to influence witnesses, intimidate jurors, prosecutors, the whole 9 yards. He's going to try to upset the American legal justice system apple cart. And he's already clear on that. And so the question is not whether the American justice system would allow this evidence or that evidence, or go down the track in the way that we've learned that it should, but whether it will sustain itself, whether it will prevail against the guy who has some power and influence, at least among his base, to upset it and to set it aside. This is a great test. It's like Ukraine, the liberal world order is at stake. Well, I suggest to you the American justice system is at stake. If he prevails in this case in Florida, it's going to be bad for all the cases and for the country.
Jay, in the previous show you had mentioned, or you asked me the question, are you suggesting that Donald Trump is being treated differently under the judicial system? And I said, yes. Do you think Donald Trump is going to be treated or has already been treated differently as if it was any other individual with these type of indictments charges?
Yeah, let me make a call to Eileen, my buddy Eileen Cannon, because she may have some thoughts about that. You like to think, as with every president who may have been a rogue in his past life, that he will see the light, that he will see the value of being a good president and leading the country. And I actually thought that for a moment in time back in 2016. I believed that with a sort of a flash of light. But then I realized that that was completely unrealistic and that he wasn't going to see the light, and he needed to be impeached. And a lot of guys who were smart, who knew him in government, said to me, he will have an impeachment in 6 months. God, how did they know? So the problem is that I don't feel that he will ever see the light. And on a comparable basis, I don't feel that Eileen Cannon is going to see the light. The question is whether she would be loyal to Trump, who appointed her. There was an article in today's paper saying she has no knowledge of criminal justice trials. That's going to be interesting. Or she is going to uphold the rule of law. A lot of the tests that I mentioned, the way Trump is going to test the system, falls with her. If she stays in the job as the supervising judge, I think we have a real problem. One is she's ignorant, and two is she's misguided.
Well, let me
as we
follow up
saw.
on that. She was severely chastised by the 11th Circuit Court on her last rulings, severely chastised. Wouldn't you adjust your behavior or your calls if you know that you have the 11th Circuit Court on both sides of your shoulder looking over?
I would,
Well,
but not everybody would.
but you'd never know. You'd never know
You
because
never know. Yeah.
a district judge wields tremendous discretionary power, some of which is effectively reviewable. For example, if she excludes evidence because she concludes that the attorney-client privilege, survives, and the evidence has to be excluded for that reason, that the government could appeal that. But let me get back to Judge Cannon. It was. I'm thinking Chief Justice Marshall, who said that a judge has to serve in a case where he or she has to serve, and has to not serve in a case where he or she should not serve. That how helpful is that? Not very. But let's talk about whether Judge Cannon will in fact preside over the trial. You mentioned the unpleasantness with the 11th Circuit ×2. She was beaten up quite a lot in a quite embarrassing way for rulings. If we have to walk back down memory lane here, if you remember, she intervened in the civil proceedings regarding a subpoena, I think, and she intruded herself into the proceeding. She entertained a civil action that interfered with a government investigation and proposed to appoint a special master to review all the classified documents, many classified documents. And the 11th Circuit, with a majority of judges appointed by former President Trump, brushed her back from the plate. So the question is not only whether the government will suggest that she should recuse herself, that's the technical term, but whether she should do that on her own motion. And judges, not uncommonly, will rule that there's no grounds for recusal, but they'll still recuse.
Yeah, sure, it's an appearance of impropriety. We have that now, but query, if she is still loyal to Trump.
It's not impropriety. The question, I think, is what does public confidence in the administration of justice require? Right or wrong, she may be a wonderful judge. There's very little evidence of that, but let's assume that she is. I saw today a really detailed report in the New York Times that went on through. She's been a judge since November of 2020, so that's 2.5 years. In that time, she has presided over a grand total of 4 litigated criminal cases. 4. One was an immigration case, one was a felon in possession case. I forget what the others were, but there were nothing resembling this. And the thing about presiding at trial as a federal district judge is you got to keep things moving, and you got to know the rules of evidence like the back of your hand, because you got to make rulings immediately. You can't say, well, stop, counsel. My clerk and I have to go into chambers and I've got to look up the law. It doesn't work that way. And
I agree that she has tremendous power as the trial judge and obligation. But there are lots of other things. There's all pretrial motions that could be dispositive. And we know that Trump has been very creative about his pretrial motions. There's post-trial motions. And there's all those things that happen during the trial, out of the hearing of the jury, out of the courtroom, where there are motions made that that could result in dispositive mistakes. And so, she has tremendous possibility of screwing this case up to a fairly well. My question to you, Gene, and it's not easy, but you've been in situations like this. What would you do if you were Jack Smith right now? Would you move to have her relieved? How would you handle this problem? Because she could really make a mess. And in any event, I don't think there's any question she would entertain delay to push it down the road, which works in Trump's favor.
If I were Jack Smith, I would not move to recuse her. I would let her stew in her own juices on this and let the chips fall where they may. And if she commits a blunder, take it up, or she may do something in midstream that gives us, not us, but gives the government a real handle for a strong, fact-specific, case-specific recusal motion.
What's your level of confidence on the 11th Circuit?
Well, yeah, but they at least have shown their fiber so far.
Mm-hmm.
Tim, I want to return to the question you asked me a long time ago here today. My great
How long
concern,
ago?
my great concern, and this is really important that Gene be with us on this, is the classified information national security question. I don't think the public, and certainly not the base, I don't think they understand what it is. You can say the Department of Justice has taken these cases to trial, and that within the military, it's very serious. Traditionally, it's life and death. But not necessarily in the civilian community, not in the Republican community for sure, which is strange because it used to be, and not in the general community. And I am worried that people don't understand what it is to take classified documents and abuse them this way.
Well, here's the delicious. Former President Trump talks too much. If you go back, and the media have been wonderful about excavating his prior statements. If you go back, he left no doubt about his own personal view about the seriousness of protecting the country's secrets. He made some highly intemperate remarks during the campaign and during his administration. And if you recall, he thought that former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton should be jailed for something having to do with her email server, a matter that ultimately was investigated like crazy, and it turns out there was no there. But a large part of the United States population that hasn't digested that fact yet. But my point is that you have the best evidence possible out of the defendant's own mouth on the importance of preserving the government's secrets. Now, we're also at a time, remember, when he's not the only person in the United States that's being prosecuted for this kind of thing. There's a young man who was in the Massachusetts Air National Guard stationed on Cape Cod, former Otis Air Force Base, who was basically helping himself and many of his pals online to some of the government's secrets. I mean, serious secrets. And he's on his way to the slammer, it would seem. He's going to be, I think, in Leavenworth for years. And this is in real time. And he wasn't president of the United States. He was, he was very far down the totem pole. So there's the president of the United States who's got access 24/7, 365 to the crown jewels of the government's secrets, and has shown himself, according to this indictment, to be totally indifferent. Sorry.
Good point.
Anybody who says that he's being treated unfairly ought to see a shrink.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but no, beyond that, though, I'm very concerned, and I think we should all be very concerned that it's not just that he violated the law. It's not just that he is arrogant and incompetent. It's that the net effect of this is that information, as with Teixeira, has been leaked. We can't afford to have these leaks. These leaks have an effect on our national security and our national integrity in the world.
And a former president should be modeling conduct.
Well,
And
Gene,
conduct he's modeling is totally subversive of a major part of the government's effort to protect our country.
Gene, I believe in the first page 3 or page 4 of the indictment were Donald Trump's own words to protect classified documents and the importance of protecting classified documents. I mean, that is listed as evidence in the indictment.
Well, I don't know what he's going to say. Nobody knows what he's going to say in his defense right now. But remember, you have to have a unanimous jury for a conviction. And all he's got to do is reach one person on that jury and convince that person that it simply isn't important.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that point, because I mean, part of what everybody is trying to sort out here is what is his game plan? Is it to raise money for his campaign? Yes. Is it to encourage the base? Yes. Is it to what should I say? Encourage those people who might have evidence contrary to his interest to keep their mouths shut? Potentially also his co-defendant with whom he had dinner at the Versailles restaurant the other night. Or is it to gum up the jury pool? And a lot of these statements that he has made, I think, have an adverse effect on public perceptions and expectations and preconceptions. I think he's, can I say, grooming the jury pool.
And
I want to go to that.
Undermining the system. He's going to try everything and anything. And this is only one example of how he is going to affirmatively try, directly or through proxy, to undermine the whole system. Sorry, Tim, go ahead.
Hey, no problem, Jay. To both of you, if this is a strategy, let's talk about that strategy. Certainly about his comments after he came back from the indictment at Bedminster. But let's look at it before Bedminster, on the Hannity interview, on the CNN town meeting at Bedminster, basically saying he has full rights to these documents. That's why he keeps them, and that's why he should keep them. This is an admission of guilt, is it not? And is this his ploy to gum up the jury, or is this an insanity plea he's working towards?
Well, if it's an insanity plea, he's been at it for a long time. But one thing I do want to say is, and it has to do with the political consequence. I'm not a political guru, really, no more than anybody else with a television set these days. But I do think we are accepting as a given the fact that the country is divided roughly 50-50. Maybe it's 48-52, 47-53, but it's awfully close to a balance. And it reminds me of the way things were. And the question is it going to keep going that way? It reminds me of the way things were. And here I go back to the wonderful history courses and contemporary civilization courses I had in college, to Renaissance Italy, where the entire population was divided between the Guelphs and the Ghibellines. They were like political parties. And some of it was hereditary, was the Duke of Milan a Guelph or a Ghibelline, and the people in Turin something else. And all of Italy was divided that way, the ruling people. And I have a feeling we're seeing the same kind of thing. And I don't know how we as a democracy get past that. And it's going to take, it's going to take a real hard landing for Mr. Trump in public by at the hands of some institution, the U.S. District Court and the higher federal courts, to drive the point home So this is very important. The other thing that I think we should mention before we wrap things up is this is not the only act in this opera. This is only one act in a multi-act opera. There's another one in Atlanta at the state level. There's another one in New York County, the Manhattan District Attorney's case. There's another one, January 6th. Let's not forget that, which is being overseen by Mr. Smith also. There's the New York Attorney General civil action. So there's a host of things that are going on, and that's just the ones that we know about. So one can hope that the overall apparatus of justice in our, and it's a very complicated apparatus. That's one of the curses as well as the blessings of federalism, a federal system, tremendously complicated way of governing a country, and inefficient in many respects. One can hope that push comes to shove, at the end of the day, there will be a clear, credible, and believed judgment as to the culpability of Mr. Trump and his co-defendant and co-defendants in other litigation.
Why hasn't that happened already? This is a very serious 37.
Well, they tried, Jay. It was called impeachment.
That didn't work. But I mean, the indictment, a grand jury, all of the evidence that Jack Smith put out in that indictment, that has not brought the divide together. That has not changed the minds of a lot of Republicans. We still had hundreds, if not thousands, of people outside the courthouse. Thankfully, they were not violent.
It's starting though, Jay. It's starting. Now you're seeing, this morning there was an interview with a Republican congressman from Nebraska. Right out of American Gothic. This is not to be offensive, but it really middle America, middle part of the country. That's this is rock-ribbed republicanism, old-fashioned. And his point was, hey, this is crazy, basically. So you're seeing people, Senator Murkowski of Alaska is another example. You're seeing people increasingly saying, hey, let's get a grip here. Otherwise, the Republican Party, a party to which, as Jay knows, our father was a dedicated member, one of the very few in our neighborhood, is going down the tubes. And I think that would be unfortunate. And frankly, there's nothing coming along that would take the place of the Republican Party. So independents, Democrats, and Republicans should all pray for the health and the renewed health of the Republican Party.
Good point.
Yeah,
Jay,
yeah.
I want to touch some base on one item here. Is this case a reset of the criminal justice system, the rule of law, the idea that no one man or woman is above the law? Is this kind of a reset of what we didn't get when Nixon resigned and was not prosecuted but was pardoned?
I make a lot of distinction between this case and Nixon. Nixon was no angel, and the pardon was, to me, not appropriate. I don't think you pardon presidents in this kind of way. Now you have to, Jefferson Davis, remember him? They dropped the prosecution against him, and I wouldn't have done it. I'm not sure I would have done it with the vice president. What's his name you mentioned?
Agnew.
Agnew. I would go the distance. I would make it clear the rule of law governs, and we are all treated equally. So I don't know if it's a reset. I think this is unprecedented in so many ways. And
Well, other countries around the world take their former leaders, Italy's Berlusconi, take them to legal task all the time. Their countries haven't fallen apart quite yet, but what about the other countries that do it?
Like Scotland?
Scotland?
I don't think that plays prominent in the mind of the American judicial system as precedent. It's kind of interesting, but I'm not sure that it really makes that much difference to the American public either. And really, I worry that if he escapes this, or if there is either no prosecution, failed prosecution in those other cases you mentioned, Gene, that is going to be a huge 10-foot statement about the adequacy, the efficacy of the American judicial system. If he gets away with this, man, it's bad. It's bad. Because it flies in the face of all the rhetoric we've been hearing about how everybody's treated alike and, with no fear or favor and all that. We really can't afford, we as a country can't afford to let him get away with this.
How will this case reset American politics, Gene? Or will it?
We don't know the answer to that yet. What we have is, you have to get a little granular on this. Look what's happening in the House of Representatives. You have a speaker who's got a 4-vote majority, and he's got more than 4 people who are, it's impossible to be too far right in the current House of Representatives on the Republican side. If you think you're the furthest right person, look to your right. There's somebody to your right, and there's somebody to that person's right, and there's somebody to that person's right. So that's going to sort itself out. I personally, I think that the speaker's days are numbered as speaker. I think there's going to be some kind of explosion within the House, and what you might find is some fusion, sort of crossbench, somehow somebody who's not much of a Republican becoming speaker with the support of the Democrats, by the way. In the Senate, who knows? These many of the seats are safe. It's going to be a wild election, and it's all going to be up for grabs because the Senate is so finely balanced. And then you have the presidential race, and some of the comments that the declared candidates have been making are so bizarre. The amount of tap dancing that's going on is really impressive as political tap dancing goes. People who want it 8 ways from Sunday. They want to be pro-Trump but not too pro-Trump. They want to be for law and order but also pardons. And this is not Hillary. And all of this stuff. It is total. I think. A total cloud that we're steaming into, a fog bank that we're steaming into now, a fog bank that's in a minefield.
Nice visual.
This is so reminiscent of Anne Applebaum's article in The Atlantic a couple of years ago, where she explained that the Russian communists took over Eastern Europe by using fear among people who were public officials, and they were all afraid. And I think what we see now among the GOP is they may go this way or that way, but they're always affected by fear. They don't want the recrimination. They don't want the retribution from Trump and his friends. And this is very problematic because it is reminiscent of the move to autocracy.
And let's not forget the Second Amendment. We have a part of the base that overlaps, very nicely with Trump's base that goes to bed at night reciting the Second Amendment. And we have a woman in Arizona who was a failed candidate for governor, and she's campaigning again on the basis of the Second Amendment. That that's the rallying cry. This is madness. And the notion that whoever has the guns is going to call the shots, no pun intended, is really disturbing. So, Jay, I think you're absolutely right on this time.
Mm-hmm. Well, Gene, with 330 million guns out there, there's a lot of opinions that we don't want to hear from. So we've run out of time, but before we leave, very briefly, I'd like to get your last thoughts on this topic. Jay, I'll go with you first.
One thing I wanted to mention is that I'm not convinced that the Department of Justice knows all the missing documents, or that it has wrapped the possibility of additional documents in those 37 counts. And it's not only that the boxes were in the bathroom. I think there's a song by that name. It's not only that the boxes were in the bathroom and every other place, on the stage and in the ballroom, for God's sake. It's that there are other ones his comments to his lawyer and the like about maybe they should just disappear, I think that might have been effectuated. Where are they now? We don't know that we have it all. And I don't think DOJ or the FBI knows they have it all. And this is very problematic. And I hope that somehow this is covered in this prosecution.
All righty. Gene, you get the last word.
All right. The only thing I would say is don't assume that the documents that are referred to in the indictment are the only documents that the government knows former President Trump illegally retained. They probably did. In fact, I'm confident they did a careful selection to limit the amount of evidence that would have to be put in or somehow subsumed in a submission under the Classified Information Procedures Act, or CIPA, so as to narrow the extent to which the country's secrets would have to be laid on the public record, even in part and even masked in the course of a criminal case. So it may be that we're seeing the tip of the iceberg, as Jay suggests, but it may be that that's all that needs to be done and that should be done in terms of protecting the rest of what's out there from even any chance of public disclosure in the course of the litigation.
And I would add that the name of the game here is protecting the country. The damage that Trump did in this way and in all other ways to our name and reputation, our influence, and our effect to lead the free world is incalculable. We still have no idea how much damage he did. We only know that it was profound.
Good point. I would like to thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on American Issues. I'd like to say thank you to Jay Fidell, the co-host, and Gene Fidell, our esteemed guest. Thank you for appearing, and to use a nautical phrase, steady she goes. Join us next week. I'm Tim Apicella, your host, and until then, aloha.
Thank you so much for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please click the like and subscribe button on YouTube. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Check out our website, thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.